Welcome to another edition of New Espresso Week. This week, we're talking all about noble coffee roasting. Woo! All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of New Espresso Week. This week, we are talking about a coffee that I just finished up by Noble Coffee Roasting Company out of Ashland, Oregon. I honestly have no idea where Ashland is. I should probably have looked that up on the map before I did this video. However, you got their Pompadour Espresso blend here. Tasting notes. Well, let's start with the tasting notes. They list jasmine, light caramel, and bergamot. Now, I didn't find this. So jasmine and bergamot, though both of those flavors appear to me to be more floral. And when I say floral, like think when you stick your face in a flower and all of those just complex smells that you get. Well, in this case, I don't know that I really got that. Here it was a very chocolatey coffee, a very well-balanced coffee, slightly sweet, maybe for me a little bit more of a, maybe kind of pear or another stone fruit kind of sweetness. So nothing that really lended too much floral complexity. So what is interesting is I think if you were to cup these coffees independently, because they have Africa, Central, and South America. So for me, most of the coffees that I have gotten from Central America, specifically, tend to lend to be more of that typical, what I like to describe as your grandfather's cup of coffee. So what does that mean? Well, it essentially means that it's more earthy, it is more chocolatey, it's nuttier. If you roasted it dark, that would kind of be like, if I was to, any people that are, I would say the older generations that are interested in coffee, that have been drinking coffee for a long time, generally if they're not really interested in trying something unique like a washed Ethiopian that's super fruity or an African that's really fruity, to kind of open their eyes to a really clean version of the coffee that they're used to drinking, I will recommend like a Central American, like a Guatemalan, a Costa Rican, something in those regions. However, sometimes for me, the Costa Ricans can be really floral and complex. And it seems for me, most of the Guatemalans I've had have been more of this kind of earthy, darker, kind of lend better to a French press kind of brew. And so those are kind of generally the coffees I will lean them to. So I got a lot of that kind of flavor in this coffee, but I also didn't get, with their flavor notes of jasmine and bergamot, when they say Central America, then with those tasting notes, I imagine more of a Central American coffee, and I imagine a lot of that acidic complexity. Now, when you're pouring espresso, you're getting a lot of oils, and so a lot of times that complexity can kind of be muted. So I'm not sure if when they were sample roasting this coffee, if they were cupping it and they're tasting the coffee, and then as they're creating and blending their espresso blend, if they're then roasting the coffees, blending them together, and then cupping them, doing a cupping of the blend to kind of make sure they've got an even quality amongst all the coffees, and then they're tasting it black, you would definitely get a lot more of those kind of delicate flavors like a bergamot or like a jasmine, something that's just more delicate, where I feel an espresso kind of gets muted. So for me, it doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't there. I just didn't necessarily taste it once I made a cappuccino. So with that being said, it may be there. I never drank it black just to taste it, because I'm always interested in how the espresso ages from start to finish, because it usually takes me about a week and a half or 2 weeks to kind of go through a full 12-ounce bag of espresso. Also, doing a cappuccino, if you think about if you make a black cup of coffee and you add a little bit of cream, that cream will also kind of mute some of the acidity and some of the complexity. So again, brewing a cappuccino, traditional, I usually do about 36 to 40 grams of espresso, and then 140 and 150 grams of oat milk on top. And so, yeah, I didn't really get those flavors. And bergamot, for me, if you think of like a bergamot candle, so if you're not familiar with what that note might be, go to like your local candle store and find the candles that are more dedicated towards men. They have kind of these more masculine flavors. They more than likely will have a bergamot candle. And if you smell that candle, it has kind of this cologne-y, woodsy, earthy tone. So I guess I got kind of that earth tone that came through, but none of the sharpness. So bergamot kind of has this sharp, pungent flavor that kind of cuts through when you smell it. Didn't really get that in the espresso. And light caramel, definitely got caramel sweetness. If you think about caramel, it's not overly sweet, it's very buttery, it's very thick, it's kind of muted. You can eat a big caramel and it's not going to shock your palate with how sweet it is because all the fat in the butter kind of mutes it. So I think in an espresso, you get all the oils in the coffee. If you haven't seen it yet, James Hoffman, who's a great coffee professional out of the UK, he recently did a centrifuge of coffee, and he brewed some coffees, spun them, and it essentially separates all the different compounds in the coffees. And he actually tasted just the fats that come from coffee, and you should see his reaction. It's pretty fantastic. But I would be interested to taste them because according to him, it was very, very unpleasant. So with that being said, definitely got the light caramel flavor. And again, I have kind of been on a roll here. So as you know, a lot of you may, if you're following this, I use a coffee subscription to get coffees and taste them. I pay full price for them, so these weren't sent to me for free, and I never know what I'm getting. So I think the great thing about a coffee subscription with a multi-roaster coffee subscription is they kind of just send you new coffees, and it's a great way to expand your palate. And the last couple of reviews I've done, the espressos have been really good. And they've actually been espressos that I like because they aren't super tedious espressos. They don't, for me, there are a couple qualities that I look for. One is that there should be enough acidity and sweetness to cut through the milk, but there should be a really solid base. And so what I mean by a solid base is that the espresso should blend really nicely with milk. It's almost, the best way I could describe it would be like a mocha or a hot chocolate espresso, if that makes sense. Like, think about how chocolate blends really well with milk because of that cocoa base. And if you did like a dark chocolate and you cut the sugar out and you just did a pure dark chocolate, hot chocolate, I think you would start to lend into kind of some of the bitterness. And I hate to use the word bitterness because our coffee shouldn't be overly bitter, but it's the best descriptor I could think of. Some of those bitterness compounds that kind of shock the palate like espresso does. So that should kind of be the base, right? You should have this really great foundation for the coffee to sit in the milk, but then something to cut through the acidity. So something that kind of, or something to cut through the creaminess of the milk and the chocolatey, cocoa, nutty base of the espresso. In this coffee, it appears that they were using an African. One of my friends that's a roaster, what's funny is I got to know their coffees really well. I was always cupping, I've cupped coffees with him. And one day they ran out. They were using a natural Ethiopian in their espresso blend. And I went in and I got a cappuccino and I was sitting there talking to him and I was like, whoa, what did you put in here? You changed this up. And he's like, oh, you noticed? And he was kind of worried because he was worried that their customer base would notice. However, I feel that it's just because I knew their coffees really well. And in there, it was an African, and I thought it was really, really great. African coffees have this kind of stone fruit sweetness. So what are stone fruits? Pears, peaches, you might even be able to, plums, that sort of thing. I think apples don't really fit in there. And maybe not even pears, because pears technically aren't stone fruit. But yeah, you have peaches, plums, apricots, all of the fruits that have those hard stones in the middle. A lot of times those are the kind of the sweetness that you get from an African coffee, and I thought it tasted really great. Here, it could have just been also the bag, because when coffees are blended, you're not necessarily getting the same even amount of each coffee in each bag. And so you never know, I could have ordered another bag and the sweetness that I was looking for could have cut through a lot better. So as far as a scale of, a 5-star scale rating, I would give this probably 4.5, just because it was a really nice cocoa-y base. Nothing spectacular, didn't knock my socks off. It was great, but it wasn't something like I can't wait to order another bag. I can't wait for them to send me another one of these. And generally, if they send me another coffee, if I, when they email me like, hey, we picked it a coffee for you, here it's sending. If it is one that I've had, I generally go in and cancel it and send me something else because I've already had that. So anyways, if you haven't seen, here's a video to my Tony's Espresso. That is an espresso that is one that kind of has really knocked my socks off and has been a really great espresso. And I feel is one that would also be great to learn on. So as far as Noble goes, great coffee. Looking at the roast profile, also very even, looked very nice, really no complaints there. Yeah, and so also if we look at the processing of these coffees, it was basically all washed process, so no naturals, which we're starting to see some naturals come out of Central America and South America. Not so much, well, Africa. This could be a washed Ethiopian also. I'm assuming that it's coming from Kenya because of some of the sweetness. But now that I look at their tasting notes, if I had to guess, I would assume that they probably used a washed Ethiopian, because with some washed Ethiopians, you can get really beautiful floral notes that are a little sweeter than some Central Americans. So now that I'm kind of thinking about that out loud, kind of an interesting combination as far as creating a blend if it was a washed Ethiopian. Some thoughts there. A washed Ethiopian, you can either get a really fruity. My friends over at Sweet Bloom right now have this washed Ethiopian that you would think it's a natural processed coffee. And if you're not familiar with washed versus natural is, I've got a whole video on processing types, so check that out. But yeah, if this is a washed Ethiopian, kind of an interesting, if you find one that's super fruity, great choice. But if it's a more floral one, I'm not sure I would add the floral if I went with a Central American coffee. However, not listing the specific region, if it was, say, Guatemala, Costa Rica, one of those Central American coffees. South American, I'm immediately going to Brazil, because Brazil's kind of provide that really great base, which this did have a really good base, so that would be my assumption there. Central American, again, I would go Guatemalan, because not a lot of floral complexity coming through, but in their tasting notes they have jasmine and bergamot. So yeah, anyways, kind of getting a little deep on my thoughts on the regions and trying to deconstruct where I think the specific coffees came from. But again, great coffee roaster. I definitely would check it out. I also like the packaging. Sometimes I feel like the packaging is important because, yeah, why not? I think it's brand is important, and if you're a coffee roaster, it's important to stand out on the shelf. I like the color combination. I like the green. I like the earth tones. I also like the lion. Yeah, so great coffee. Oregon is known for having coffee, especially if Ashland is anywhere near Portland. We know Portland is a kind of a coffee mecca. So definitely check out Noble Coffee Roasters. Again, I'd probably give this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars, just because for me it really kind of lacked that punch to get through the milk, that kind of sweetness that we want to kind of round out the espresso. A little bit more just kind of a heavy base. A lot of light caramel flavor. I didn't really get too much of the jasmine or the bergamot. But yeah, check them out. Great coffee. And if there's a coffee that you would like me to try, I'm more than happy to support a roaster in your area and give you a review and let you know what I think. Just shoot a comment below. Let me know if there's a coffee I should check out, and I'd be more than happy to support them and do a review and give you kind of my honest opinion on it. And one final note, how was I brewing this? Again, went to their website. I didn't see any specific brewing methods for the espresso. So again, I kind of stuck to my standard brew method of 18.5 grams in, roughly 36 to 40 grams out. I will play around a little bit and sometimes do a short shot and even a longer, maybe 45 grams, really kind of push that shot. It seemed pretty stable across the platform. So again, I know I've said this a few times in the last couple of reviews, but if you are looking for a coffee to kind of experiment with, I think this and the last 3 reviews I've done have been good coffees to kind of taste with and review, because you can really brew the espresso in a whole different wide variety of ways and it will still taste good. So yeah, if you like this video, please share it with your friends, let them know we're seeing it. The more people that subscribe and like the video just knows that I'm providing good content to you, so I can help create more for you and help you create cafe quality coffee at home. As always, coffee, pedal, repeat.